Hello, I am Martin Packer. I am the author of The Science of Qualitative Research. This is one of a series of videos about the theory and practice of qualitative research. This is the third of 3 videos about interpretation. In the first video, we learned something of the history of hermeneutics, the theory of interpretation, and how it is helpful for qualitative research today. We looked at 3 theories of interpretation and learned that in qualitative research, the researcher is crucial because the researcher's ability to come to understand and then interpret what people are saying and doing is at the heart of the research process. We learned too that qualitative research cannot be a matter of trying to get to a hidden truth, the true meaning of what someone says or does, so that a code can be attached. Rather, qualitative research involves interpretation that articulates the researcher's understanding, spelling out what is on the surface of phenomena, but not usually noticed because it has been taken for granted. In the second video, we explored in more detail the relationship between understanding and interpretation, what is known as the hermeneutic circle. This refers to the relationship between part and whole, and between text and context. It also refers, importantly, to the way that the understanding that a researcher has of someone's words or actions, in an interview, for example, or in a video or in field notes, it refers to how that understanding must be articulated. It must be spelled out in detail. It must be put into words to communicate to other people. And I showed you an example from my own research. In this third video, I want to focus on another important aspect of the hermeneutic circle. We have seen that understanding is always an active process. This means that our understanding of someone's words is never neutral and detached. We always have preconceptions that stem from who we are, where we come from, and what we are doing. We cannot step out of history or culture, or out of our time or place, though we can reflect upon them. One way of exploring this is to say that interpretation always has a fore-structure. There are 3 aspects to this fore-structure, traditionally called fore-having, foresight, and fore-grasp. Now, these are not the prettiest of names, I grant you, but so far no one has offered me good alternatives. First, in any research project, you will need to have access to the phenomenon that you want to study, not in isolation, but in its involvement within a whole situation. That is the fore-having. Second, you will inevitably have a perspective or a point of view, a concern, an interest, which shapes how you will encounter the phenomenon and how you will understand it. Your research question both arises from this interest and puts it into words. This is the foresight. Third, in order to articulate your understanding, you will also have, or you will need, a set of concepts, perhaps a whole detailed theory that provides a framework for your interpretation, and this is the fore-grasp. An important part of preparing for any qualitative research project is to get clear on these aspects of the fore-structure. First, what exactly is the phenomenon that you want to understand? Second, what is your concern and interest? And so what is your research question? In other videos, I've talked about Jürgen Habermas's proposal that there are 3 basic interests in all research: an instrumental interest, a communicative interest, or an emancipatory interest. And third, what is your interpretive framework? You want to be sure, for example, that you are avoiding ontological dualism. For example, and it's an example that I've referred to in other videos, sociologist Loic Wacquant conducted a study with boxers in South Chicago. The phenomenon he wanted to understand was the fact that people become boxers when seemingly it is a brutal, dangerous sport. Why on earth would anyone want to become a boxer? He obtained access to the phenomenon not only by visiting the gym, but also by himself training to become a boxer alongside the people he wanted to understand. This was his fore-having. His concern was to counter the stereotypes about boxers and the world of boxing. He pointed out that in all the debate over the sport, one voice is invariably drowned out and lost, that of the fighters themselves. That was his foresight, essentially an emancipatory interest in Habermas's terms. QUAL put it into practice by getting to know the boxers and talking with them, by conducting interviews, but as informal conversations between friends. QUAL's interpretive framework, his foregrasp, was derived from his training as a sociologist. He insisted that understanding why and how someone becomes a boxer is not a matter of obtaining their opinions and beliefs or their point of view. It is a matter of exploring how they have committed themselves to the world of boxing. Their understanding of themselves and of the life they have chosen is not explicit and conceptual. It is practical and implicit. A researcher needs to work to reconstruct it. QUAL then paid attention to how the boxers talked about their everyday activity, the tropes, the metaphors they used when he talked with them. We rarely pay conscious attention to the metaphors that people use, but they always influence us. They shape our understanding. They move us. They give us a sense of what it is like to be a boxer, in this case. And in his articles, QUAL articulates his understanding of those metaphors. He describes in detail three constituents of the boxing life, three aspects of the commitment to boxing: its instrumentality, its aesthetics, and its ethics, and the corporeality of this commitment. In this way, QUAL has tried to change the way that boxing and boxers are understood. But also, because boxers do what we all do, they commit themselves through their bodies to a particular way of life, he has tried to change how we understand ourselves. Okay, in these 3 videos, we've been learning how analysis in qualitative research is a process of interpretation. And interpretation is the work of articulating the understanding which one has from careful attention to what people say and do, based upon familiarity with the language and with the kind of setting they are in. Of course, understanding is not always correct. One reason to articulate understanding as interpretation is to become aware of the problems in one's understanding: inconsistency, incompleteness, and prejudice. As the researcher articulates, he or she enters into a dialogue with the reader, in which they try to make good on their responsibilities to be transparent and to lay out the evidence. Interpretation, then, is not subjective. It is based on intersubjective phenomena, including language, the customs of a community, and the obligations of institutions, including the institutions of scientific inquiry. Well, thank you for watching. Write a comment and let me know what was useful in this video and what you'd like to see in other videos. And don't forget to watch the other 2 videos about interpretation.